If you grew up in Britain during the 1970s, you'll remember just how much everyday life seemed to revolve around cars. They weren't just parked outside the house, collecting dust. They were part of the family. They took you to work, carried the kids to school, survived long holiday drives to the seaside, and somehow kept going through freezing winters, dodgy weather, and roads full of potholes. And while some cars from the 70s are still famous today, others have quietly faded away. Cars that once filled British streets are now rarely seen at all. But the funny thing is, people still remember them, because these weren't just motors, they were memories. Maybe it was the first car you ever bought with your own money. Maybe it belonged to your dad. Or maybe it's the car you still wish you'd never sold. So tonight, let's take a proper trip back and look at 10 forgotten 1970s cars drivers still miss today. And as we go along, see how many you remember yourself. Number 1. The Austin Allegro. Now, the Austin Allegro often gets laughed at these days. But back in the 70s, they were everywhere. British families bought them in huge numbers, and despite all the jokes over the years, plenty of owners still have a soft spot for them. They were comfortable, practical, and easy enough to drive around town, mind you. The styling divided opinion even back then, especially that famous square steering wheel on some models. You either loved it, or wondered what on earth they were thinking. Still, for many people, the Allegro was dependable transport, the sort of car that carried shopping bags, kids, and family memories without complaint, and if you owned one, chances are you still defend it today. Number 2. The Ford Capri. Now this one made ordinary people feel sporty. The Ford Capri was the car many blokes dreamed of owning in the 70s. Long bonnet, sporty shape, and just enough attitude to turn heads without costing sports car money. Ford marketed it brilliantly too. The car you always promised yourself. And they weren't wrong. For younger drivers especially, owning a Capri felt exciting. Even if it was only the smaller engine version, you still felt like you were driving something special. Mind you, in wet weather they could keep you on your toes a bit. But that was all part of the fun. And even now, seeing a Capri instantly brings back memories of flared trousers, sideburns, and Britain in the 70s. Number 3. The Marina. Now, here's another car that often gets unfair criticism nowadays, because back in the day, the Marina sold incredibly well. Why? Because it was simple, cheap enough to buy, cheap as chips to maintain, and straightforward to work on. Exactly what ordinary drivers wanted. The Marina wasn't flashy. It wasn't trying to impress anyone, but it got families where they needed to go, and loads of learners first got behind the wheel in one. Of course, owners also remember the handling jokes, but despite all that, many people still miss them because they remind them of a simpler time, a time when cars didn't need to be perfect to be loved. Number 4. The Triumph Dolomite. Now this felt a bit posher. The Triumph Dolomite gave drivers a touch of luxury without feeling completely out of reach. Wood trim, comfortable seats, stylish design that had class about it. Especially the sporty Dolomite Sprint models. Those were properly admired back then, fast for their time too. And unlike some bigger executive cars, the Dolomite still felt manageable around town. Mind you, like many British cars of the era, they needed looking after. Rust was never far away. Still, owners loved them, because when a Dolomite was running nicely, it felt genuinely special. Number 5. The Hillman Avenger. The Hillman Avenger was one of those cars that quietly became part of everyday Britain. Reliable, practical, and roomy enough for family life. You saw them everywhere in the 70s. School car parks, supermarket runs, parked outside football grounds on Saturdays, nothing flashy, just honest motoring, and plenty of people. Remember learning basic car maintenance on these, bonnet up on the driveway at the weekend, neighbours leaning over, giving unwanted advice. That was all part of British motoring life back then. And while many Avengers disappeared years ago, the memories certainly haven't. Number 6. The Vauxhall Viva. Now, this was a cracking little everyday car. The Vauxhall Viva became hugely popular because it was affordable, practical, and easy enough to live with, perfect for young families or first-time buyers. You'll remember seeing them in all sorts of colors too. Bright yellows, oranges, browns, very 1970s. The Viva wasn't trying to be exciting, but it had charm, and because so many people owned one at some point, they became tied to all sorts of memories. First jobs, first drives, first family holidays. Funny how ordinary cars often leave the biggest impression. Number 7. The Austin Maxi. Now, this one was actually quite clever for its time. The Austin Maxi gave families loads of space and practicality years before hatchbacks became really common. Fold-down seats, roomy interior, plenty of luggage space, ideal for family trips. Mind you, people often remember the gear changes being a bit awkward, especially early models. Still, owners appreciated how useful they were, and for many families, the Maxi handled absolutely everything: camping holidays, DIY runs, trips to the seaside. A proper workhorse. And once people got used to them, many became fiercely loyal. Number 8. The Ford Granada. Now, here was a car that made people feel successful. The Ford Granada looked big, comfortable, and important, especially the gear models with all the extra trim. Back in the 70s, if someone on your street owned a Granada, chances are they were doing fairly well for themselves. Inside, they felt luxurious compared to smaller family cars. Soft seats, smooth ride, plenty of room built for cruising, and they became hugely popular with company car drivers. Mind you, they were thirsty. You could almost see the fuel gauge moving at times, but people didn't care. Granadas had presence. A proper motorway motor. Number 9. The Chrysler Alpine. Now, this one often gets forgotten completely nowadays. But back in the late 70s, the Chrysler Alpine actually felt very modern. Front dash-wheel drive, hatchback design, roomy interior. It was ahead of its time in many ways. Families liked how practical it was, easy to load up, comfortable enough on longer journeys, and modern-looking too, of course. Reliability could sometimes test your patience a bit. That wasn't exactly unusual in the 70s. But despite that, many owners still remember Alpines fondly, because they represented modern family motoring back then. Number 10. The Rover SD1. Now, this really looked futuristic when it arrived. The Rover SD1 had sleek styling that felt completely different from older British executive cars, low, wide, and modern-looking. Almost like something from a police drama on television. And speaking of police, you'll remember plenty of motorway patrol cars being SD1s. Especially the V8 versions. They looked fantastic inside. They felt roomy and comfortable too. Mind you, owners also remember the occasional reliability headache. Again, very British motoring in the 70s. But when everything worked properly, the SD1 felt brilliant. Even today, many people still think they look stunning. Looking back now, it's amazing how many of these cars have disappeared completely from British roads. Back in the 70s, they were everywhere. Now you hardly ever see one. And perhaps that's why they feel so special today, because they instantly transport people back to another time, a different Britain to slower Britain, one where family holidays meant paper maps on the passenger seat, where kids sat in the back without seatbelts, and where every long journey seemed to involve stopping for tea. Somewhere along the way, these cars became wrapped up in everyday life. Because they were perfect, far from it. Some rusted quickly, some leaked oil, some refused to start on damp mornings, but people still loved them because they had personality. But modern cars might be quicker, safer, quieter, but they rarely feel memorable in the same way. Back then, every car had its own little habits, its own sounds, its own smell, and somehow that made drivers feel connected to them. You learned how your car behaved, you listened to it, you worked around its quirks, and over time, it became part of your life story. That's why people still miss them today. Not because they were flawless, but because they remind us of who we were when we drove them. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Which of these forgotten 1970s cars do you remember most? Did you own one yourself? Or was there another 70s motor you still wish you had today? Go on, let me know in the comments. I always enjoy reading your stories. And there are some brilliant memories shared here every time. And if this video brought back a few memories from the old days, give it a like. It really helps keep these memories alive for people who remember Britain as it used to be. And if you fancy more journeys like this through Britain's motoring past, don't forget to subscribe. There's plenty more still to come, because, at the end of the day, these weren't just old cars. They were part of everyday British life. Part of growing up, part of family memories, and for many people, a small piece of the past they still miss today.